Welcome to Player Ready Podcast. I'm your host, Big Welsh Mike, and I'm chatting with Phil and Oli from Ghost Town Games, better known as the developers of Overcooked. Chaps, are you there?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, we are.
Guys. How are we doing? So, I have had the pleasure of playing Overcooked. I say pleasure, but I'm diving straight in here. You must have letters of people who are so happy with the game, or emails, or whatever correspondence has come through. But you must have people telling you that friendships have broken, divorces have happened. The stress in the kitchen, guys. What were you doing to us? You're sadists, both of you, surely.
It's really a horrible moment when you meet someone and they've heard of the game because you don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah. It's like, we played it, me and my partner. Ooh. Okay. Did it go well?
You know, it puts you in an instant situation of fight or flight, I reckon. You know, but it's wonderful. I mean, you know, I've played both the first one and the second one, and it's fascinating watching people who are calm. And I've heard you guys say this before, and as always, it's so important in everything we do that communicate properly. But then equally, I've played it with someone who I game with, and as it happens, I'll be gaming tonight. We absolutely love our co-op games, and we'll be enjoying Far Cry New Dawn tonight. And it's Overcooked. Oh, he was stressed off his nut. Absolutely, it was the earthquake level in the first game. So that was too much, and we had to stop. It was he just couldn't handle it. So I'm assuming you must have had feedback like that as well.
Yeah, there are some people out there that really struggle to just talk. I think that's one of the big things I find when people are playing it. There's some people that just shut down, and they're so used to just having their own job that they can just do and sit and heads down and do that, and then suddenly the level will change and they're just freaking out because they're just like, no, I was washing the dishes, it was my thing, I was comfortable.
Do you know what? There's a lot to be said for that. I can see how obviously you guys are a little bit sadistic on purpose with the game. You need to overwhelm people a little bit. You want to create that chaos because obviously if it's just something where you're going through the routine, the entertainment isn't there, and the let's be honest, the laughter and the taking the piss out of each other is not going to happen, and that's exactly what you want. You want people elbowing each other in the side, and maybe not reducing to fist fights, but you want that lovely little bit of friction.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is just sort of making sure that the player doesn't get sort of stuck doing the same thing repeatedly. So we do sort of deliberately push people out of position and make their lives a hell to try and just stop them getting stuck.
Also, it gives them a reason to actually communicate.
Yes.
That was a big part of the original spec for the game. It was something that we wanted people to do was to coordinate their actions and have to communicate, and the best way to do that is to force them to change roles, basically.
Yeah, it became a game where you were disadvantaged if you didn't talk, I think, was the main thing. Although when we play it now, it's definitely complete stony silence.
Oh, wow.
With a sort of... Because there's a sort of zen-like telepathy that now happens, because we played the game to death, obviously.
Do you know what? I was going to ask that, because obviously with certain games, I'm assuming there's people out there that can pour in so much time that they'd make the developers look like amateurs, and there'll be other games where the developers are still in God mode. I mean, as you say, you guys probably don't even talk during it. Is it just that good for you, or that easy for you?
It's definitely this feeling of you're just assuming that the other person's going to do a certain thing, and then when the moment they don't do exactly what you predicted them to, you lose it.
Yeah, there's been some big meltdowns. We're just so used to playing a level over and over again, and suddenly somebody decides, oh, you know what, I'm just going to change my role midway. I'm like, what? No, what's happening? We have to talk. I have to.
And the moment you bring someone else in, do you have that a quiet feeling of,
they hate
I really miss Ollie. We used to play this so well. I hate you.
Well, no, we've had times when Jem, who works with us, has sat down to play a level with me and Ollie, because we'll be testing 3-player, and we won't be talking, so she'll have no idea what we're planning or what we're thinking.
Yes.
And she'll just be screaming, being like, what? This is a game about teamwork. Why aren't you working
I
as a
can
team?
already feel the sympathy as soon as you said Jem has sat down to play with us, and no, this is okay. So I tell you what, let's go over a few basics here, because obviously people will know that you guys have developed Overcooked. But so Phil, you've concentrated on the design of the game. So is that just the graphic design and the 3D design, or is that the concepts as well? Let us know how deep that goes.
How do I describe? I always say that if you can see it, then I did it in Overcooked.
Right.
But also the design, although the design responsibility is kind of split between me and
I mean,
from a high level, I guess.
I would say Phil is more the sort of main designer. I think it's fair to say of sort of game mechanics and definitely
Right,
level
okay.
design. And then my job's code. Yeah, so everything you can't see.
So, but when it comes to hammering out the ideas, first of all, Ollie, do you end up having to sort of wrestle Phil with ideas, or is it pretty equal in the sense that he actually does listen to you, or gives the illusion of listening to you?
You're asking whether Phil listens to me. I know this is difficult.
I literally zoned out. Just then.
Oh no. I think we've so whenever we've had sort of disputes about design, I think it's always the tiebreaker has been user testing. Because particularly for Overcooked 1, we would sort of like be uncertain as to what would be fun for players and what wouldn't be fun for players, and then you just literally have to put it in front of a bunch of players and go like, okay, so which that worked, and then the decision's easy because you can just go, oh no, they just didn't understand that at all.
Right,
Yeah,
okay,
whatever.
I see. And then, so obviously with the Overcooked idea itself, now, was it one of you guys used to work in the kitchen, and this is where it's come off the back of? Is that right? Am I remembering that rightly?
That's a part of it. I never like to say that was like, I was sat washing pots one day and suddenly had a flash of brilliance. It was more that we were looking for. Go on, what were you going to say?
I was going to say Phil's got in trouble before for suggesting that he might have been a chef.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whenever
wow.
I say I worked in a kitchen, and people are always thinking, I worked in a kitchen. I get what you
he's
mean.
like an expert master chef.
Really, I was like 16, spotty and washing plates, and occasionally being shouted at.
Well, and that's the thing. So people, it's often a closed-off environment. Even when it's an open kitchen, you see the chefs at the forefront. So people don't know what goes on sometimes. My partner, my girlfriend, she's worked over in a famous restaurant chain not too many years ago, and the chaos that was in there was controlled chaos. Okay, it wasn't quite military precision, but geez, it had to run correctly or things fall apart very quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's work against a very obvious timer, right? I mean, it kind of plays like a video game anyway when you're working in a kitchen, because the order comes in and then you have that set amount of time really that you've got to get something out the door, and everyone has to play their parts, and there's normally 5 or 6 different people responsible for different parts of a dish, not to mention the waiting on staff and the pot wash.
And I love the idea, and it's subtle and it's clever, but I like the idea of the tips being given and the fact that it's obviously graded on how prompt the food is, because that also gives you the human element, because of course we're not seeing those customers stuffing the food into their mouths, but it just lets you know that people are waiting out there, as opposed to this, once again, just almost a technicality. So it's a nice touch.
Oh, thank you. It's always unclear, I think, in the game as to where the customers, what the customers of the Onion Kingdom are when you're on this, like, you're in hell cooking on lava, and it's like, what's going on? What is the situation here where this would be a restaurant?
I was going to say, we always get people asking as well about the the truck levels. Like, where's that food going?
Just throwing it onto the road.
Yeah, I just realised your hands are tied a little bit, aren't they? I mean, number one, you could say to yourself, God, you know what, it'd be really great to see the customers just sort of comedically throwing food down each other's mouths, or even throwing it into each other's mouths across the table. But the amount of design time that would take, and the amount of sort of screen space that would take, and then let alone you've got, hot air balloon level, it's just... You'd have to have other people in hot air balloons hovering around. So no, that's okay. I get it. It's not quite going to work. So now you've mentioned Gemma. So Gemma's helped with the writing, and I know she helps with other stuff as well. Yeah. So did she come on board during the first game, just before the second? Where does that come in?
It's the end of the first game, and then moving on to the second. The second was like she was always helping out.
Yeah.
During the first game,
right?
With some stuff, but we properly actually hired Gemma really sort of game Overcooked 2 time, I think, to do, because we basically got completely snowed under in all of the outside of development type stuff.
Yeah.
So community management and the finances and all of the all biz dev stuff, and then also Gemma is our writer as well. So Gemma's done a lot of the writing on the DLCs. I think she wrote her first writings on the DLC for Overcooked.
I get it.
Yeah, that's right, the Christmas one.
And then all the writing for Overcooked.
So to sum it up in a way that resonates with me hugely, and that is, if you're doing any sort of software development, Gemma basically deals with all the nasty stuff that goes around it that you don't want to do because you want to get on and design and you want to get on and code. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, so I think we described this as words what was it? Words, numbers, and pictures.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to credit ourselves as at some point.
Yeah.
So Gemma's words and Phil is pictures, and I'm numbers. Specifically in-game numbers.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. I've dealt with programmers nearly all of my life, and honestly, every programmer with Salt just wants to get on with it, doesn't want to bother with management of the company, and just wants to create
the real world. Usually doesn't want to deal with the real world.
This is possibly a conversation for another time, but you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's if you think about it, it's responsible as to why people have ended up in their bedrooms learning to code and then turned it into careers in the first place. So yeah, no,
it's good that we get paid for it.
Yeah, well, do you know what? That's
and not institutionalized.
Well, I suppose we were in a way, but individually in respective bedrooms, you just shunned away from the limelight.
Yeah.
So so let's go back a little bit here now. So you guys have been with is it both of you who were with Frontier Developments? Is that where you guys got to know each other?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. So how long were you with Frontier?
I always get confused with this. I think were you there 8 or 6?
6.
So I was there 8 years. Yeah. You were there 6 years.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So and then did you guys work on a lot of games, or just a lot of work on Elite Dangerous, or how did that pan out?
Thankfully, not Elite Dangerous, because I think it was quite difficult. We worked on a real variety of projects.
Ah, right.
So we started. My first game at Frontier was on Connectimals. Do you remember Connectimals?
Yeah, that rings a bell already. Hang on, what platform was that on?
On the Microsoft, so it's on the Xbox 360, or on their weird camera thing they did for a while.
Ah, Kinect. Right, yes, on the Kinect, of course, yes, the play on words. Yeah, so that was that from a development perspective, that must have been good fun messing around with the hardware. But does that go on?
I like the good fun.
It was interesting. So Connectimals, I got brought on to do what we were calling gesture filters, which was where you would take all of the skeleton data that comes from the camera and then try and turn that into game input. I found that really interesting and really a really interesting problem, but it was definitely like a really hard problem.
It was such early days with the hardware when we were working on it. So I think there was an image of it being finished, and then everyone was sort of just building a game with what was there. But it was very much like, there'd be new iterations of the hardware coming in every few months, and then you'd have to just completely start from fresh, and you were never sure what was going to be there on launch and what was going to be coming later.
Yeah, because we were a Connect launch title, so we were before the thing was finished. We started developing a game on it, and then you were trying to turn this thing into to take you sort of very fuzzy data and trying to turn it into something reliable that players could actually.
And you have to remember at that time you didn't really even know how do players pause using Kinect. So there wasn't a gesture for that yet. That hadn't been sort of sorted out. Or how are people going to navigate just the Xbox store using Kinect? All that stuff was still being worked out while we're trying to develop a game at the same time. So it's kind of like building a controller at the same time as trying to build a game.
Yeah, I think with the Kinect stuff, I think the first camera, the one that was on the 360, was a lot less precise. So you had to do a lot. There was a lot of problems with. We'd have these bugs come in where it was like, oh yeah, the game can be entirely completed by putting an office chair in front of it, just sort of spinning it around, because it would just generate loads of garbage skeleton data, and then it would just analyze that and be like, oh yeah, they did every trick.
There's quite a lot of programmers where they had coats on their seats just to be fake.
Oh yeah, the QA would have a coat stand with a coat on it, and that's how they would play 2-player. That was Kinect Disneyland Adventures.
Absolutely wonderful. I love that. I suppose it's better than bringing in a selection of blow-up dolls and then dressing them up like the other staff in the office. So it keeps it a little.
I see that on the expense reports.
That's on the DLC. But does that? Did you feel your cynical part of your brain? Because once again, with designers and programmers, it's lovely getting in and solving problems. And I mean, let's be honest, that's, I guess, half the joy. It's slightly torturous, but it's absolutely satisfying. But also, there must be part of you thinking, is this actually going to sell? Because, we have the same problem with VR these days, in the sense that, these are fascinating ideas technologically, but from a marketing perspective, and at the fact that consumers might even want to then spend the money on extra bits of equipment, you guys must have been at least a healthy dose of cynical with it all, or did you not mind at all and think, well, that's their problem, not ours?
It was weird working on the Kinect stuff, because I think it was... there's a tinge of sadness I felt when Kinect finally stopped being bundled with the Xbox One. There was this feeling like, that's a shame, because the tech involved.
It's really impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. Particularly when it got to the second generation Kinect that shipped with the Xbox One, and where it's just felt like, oh, I wish someone had made like something. Like,
Yeah, there was
really
the potential
used
there, wasn't there? I always felt like it was just lacking that one button or thumbstick or something, because I felt like it was a great in addition to, you know, the finer controls you have with a controller, but just on its own it was just, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Kinect suffered a little bit from the fact that obviously it was like £100 for the camera, and then that meant the console expensive and no one wanted to buy it. But I mean, VR has that problem in like to a factor of 10, which makes me worry a little bit about the sort of VR stuff, because we would love to do something VR related, but I think
of course
our focus has always been on local co-op, and then to do something local co-op on VR, you have to assume that people have access to 2 headsets, and you're like, who has 2 headsets? No one has 2 headsets.
No, people with, and I want to say more money than sense, no, but you know what? Well, dedicated gamers and gamers who've got friends. I realise that might be an oxymoron right there, but it's, I get it. I understand what you mean, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's got to be something that people want to buy in the real world as well. So yeah, I love that it exists, and it's wonderful to see what's technically possible. But as you say, unless everybody embraces it, then you just won't get that momentum, which is, well, for you especially, personally, a little bit heartbreaking, because of course you guys invested time in this. So
yeah.
But just out of interest now, with Frontier Developments, did you end up feeling like, obviously you guys went alone and went off and did this yourselves with Overcooked, and there's that feeling of that you want to have more control over what you're doing, or is it more that you want to have more of the game that's yours, more ownership, if you know what I mean, from an emotional perspective, as in, this is ours? Or did you just hate everybody there?
Every single one.
Let's list them.
By name.
It's there we go. Non-discriminatory. Absolutely everybody sucks, and they can die in a ditch. I get it. Right, okay.
I don't think it was about putting our stamp on things, because I think like everyone we worked with at Frontier was great. It was just like maybe the projects we were working on weren't what we'd ideally be working on.
I think that there's a real difference between the kind of game you make when you are 2 people and the kind of game that you have to make when you are 200 people.
Oh, yes.
And I think that our interest had always been, even within Frontier, on working on smaller projects within the studio. And I think that going indie was just the sort of natural conclusion of that process. Whereas like, okay, what if we just didn't have to worry about supporting the sort of business needs of a sort of larger group of people? Because in fairness to every large studio, they have like massive financial constraints due to the fact that they have to keep however many people employed, and they have however many people of each discipline, so they have to go like, okay,
I think that's something that we really appreciated upon leaving, really, more than anything. Just like managing 2 people was hard enough, and having to balance the the business side of things with the creative side of things with just the 2 of us made you realise like how hard that would be for a 200-person studio, and the compromises you'd have to make to make sure that everyone is still.
Because if you're a studio like Frontier, then you can make a game like Elite Dangerous, which is a game which is like sort of amazing in its scope and its sort of simulation and what it's capable of doing, but that requires hundreds of people's like bodies to do. And then it becomes a sort of an organisational challenge in and of itself to just get that kind of project through. Whereas if you're a 2-person studio, you can do something that just wouldn't be commercially viable for a large studio. So like you can make a game that's like really heavily focuses on sort of the local co-op side of things, and you can go like, oh no, we can do that because
you don't need to sell 8 million copies.
Yeah, we don't need to sell millions and millions of copies in order to be able to feed ourselves, which is a nice thing.
And I think both having worked in smaller teams within Frontier just made you realise how much more agile you could be with decisions as well.
Yes.
You can just take an idea and you can change direction much faster than you could when there's 200 people. Suddenly if you make a really big design decision, a sweeping one with a big team, then suddenly you've got animators and artists and audio designers all breathing down your neck, being like, okay, but you realise we now have to throw away hundreds of hours of work. And
I mean, the nice thing about working where we did, and that sort of those years at Frontier, was that we got to work on so many little projects that we sort of got that experience of like different scales of working, because we all got to work on the sort of big projects that would take 100 people, and then some of the, because obviously you did the work on Lost Winds on the Wii stuff, which was like 30-ish people, was it? Was it more than that?
No, it was about 30, I think. Well, this was Lost Winds 2. And then we did some mobile projects as well, slightly smaller as well, and some stuff for Amazon. But
yeah, the Tales of Space was like a team of like 10, wasn't it? And then up to like the largest project we worked on was like Connect Disneyland Adventures, which was hundreds of people. It was a ridiculous, massive project like across many studios. So yeah, they've got that real scale. I lost my train of thought then.
No,
talking about.
What about so when you guys decided to go it alone? Obviously, that was was that sort of suitably terrifying, or was it genuinely okay, ignoring the bank balance?
Genuinely terrifying. Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, we knew we had the game idea to some extent already, because we've been working on some like little prototypes in our spare time whilst we were at Frontier, and sort of finding odd evenings to work on things. We tried a few ideas for games, and Overcooked was the one that was starting to stick.
Yes.
So when we got to the point of actually going it alone, we knew we could make the game. I think we were confident of what the game was.
Yeah, I think of all the ideas, it was one where the scope kind of fit within what we thought we'd be able to manage in the. I think we gave ourselves.
Yeah, it took about
6 months. I think we said initially, which is
we predicted it as like twice as quick as it actually ended up being, and that did reflect a lot in like we got horrendously poor by the end of it, like developing Overcooked 1, down to like literally just zero money in my account. Well, I got £13.51 in my account at the end of the development process.
Wow!
So it's like, I hadn't paid rent for like
days.
2 months, so it was just like, this is a problem.
Tight.
Yeah.
So we knew what we were doing, but there was a definite. We'd not played it with. I don't think any member of the public had like played it. We hadn't shown it to like even like a,
it was a really
non-friend
chunky
or
prototype
anything.
really that we had.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I think the scariest part is just how much learning you have to do after you've jumped. So like as you're falling through the sky, you suddenly have to think, okay, we need to set up a company, and we need to set up a website, and we need to have like an online presence, and we don't even have a name for the game yet.
Yes.
And we need to have a logo, but we can't do a logo until we've come up with a name, and there's all this sort of weird little minutiae details you hadn't really thought about that you're suddenly having to.
Yeah, you suddenly have to register a company and then like work out how's our tax going to work.
Yeah.
And like,
Well, I was just going to say, and but do you have any? You clearly mustn't have too much regret about what you've done, or at least any at all, because from on the outside looking in, you guys have made the right decision.
No regrets at all. I mean, I probably would have done it if we were doing it again. I probably would have done it slightly more organised. I think
it's hard to tell, isn't it?
Hindsight.
It's hard to tell whether that panic is kind of necessary. Whether it fuels some of the creative decisions you make, because you have got that time limit and then less freedom than maybe you might have if you were just if we'd taken a bit longer before.
There was that point where we were shipping the game, and I had to be in up in Scotland, and I was on in a campsite, and I was trying to ship the game through mobile phone data, and I couldn't afford to buy credit, so I had to borrow my girlfriend's phone in order to like tether it to my laptop and ship. So I think it was the final build for the DLC, the first DLC.
Yeah, so this is while we were going out to E3, and I'm doing level screenshots on the plane.
Oh yeah,
just before we're landing, that we're going to be on the world map as you went through it.
So let me get this right. Phil was doing all the work while you were at camp. Is that pretty much it?
I think there's slightly different times, but yeah. I think I was going through cert when you was on the plane. It's like,
so obviously you've got a degree of freedom,
yes.
But then you are published by Team 17.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So Team 17, I'm familiar with back in the old Commodore Amiga days, so I'm familiar with a bit of their sort of older back catalogue as well. Now, has that then takes away a certain amount of control, or has it been still quite freeing, and let alone they can deal with an awful lot of the sort of top level stuff, and you guys can ignore even more of that in a good way and get on with designing the game?
It's been really freeing, actually. So to sort of just summarise our situation with Team 17, when we when they helped us publish the first game, we had more or less finished the game really up to the point when we signed a deal with them.
I think we made one level after signing with them, but otherwise the levels in the game are the levels.
So creative freedom wise, there was no sort of danger of anyone stepping on anyone's toes at that point, because the game was pretty much finished. But they helped out with a lot of the QA side of things, some usability and like score balancing side of things at the end, as well as doing PR and marketing and that side of things.
Yeah.
And then with the sequel, it's actually co-developed with them, so it was kind of taking what was the game, the fully fleshed out design for Overcooked, and just building on it really. But again, we worked so closely with them on that it wasn't really a case of like, oh, they're taking control away from us so much as it's just like sharing the burden, I guess.
They've always been really good, I think, at listening to sort of like our feedback, and we've always had like control over the process. Like we have right of veto over a lot of the stuff, everything that happens with Overcooked 2. And Overcooked 1, we didn't even have any contact with the development side of things. It was literally just about marketing and sort of PR stuff. So they've been really good for that, I think. It's been different, I think, for us because of the way we contacted a publisher to a lot of people's experience with publishers, I think, because we had a finished game by the time that we were signed as a publisher.
Not through choice. So
that's true.
We were pitching the game when it was in an unfinished state, and we got plenty of rejections along the way, including Team 17 actually, who initially said no thank you, because they were very busy with ukulele stuff at the time. And then they came back to us.
Right, okay, yeah.
They came back to us about 6 months later, maybe not as long as that, and said basically they'd just been playing the prototype non-stop in the office, and they just they loved it. They'd fallen in love with it, really.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's a sort of ringing endorsement ultimately, if they've been hacking away at that and enjoying it, and the other thing is obviously publishers sometimes get it in the neck in the press, and from a community perspective, it's nice to see it going well, because obviously sometimes people just see publishers as an evil entity, I guess, and maybe the fact that quietly you might be able to type in on the computer, please send help, Mike, because they've taken our loved ones and they're releasing one at a time with every stretch goal of money we make them.
Taking my cats.
Whatever family you've got.
It is very daunting, like signing up with a publisher. We were definitely very sceptical of everyone we met, because you just don't know. You don't know what their intentions are, or how they view the game compared to how you view it, and that side of things.
I was terrified signing with Team 17. I was terrified signing with any publisher at all, that we were going to get ripped off, and then we were going to wake up in a back alley with all our organs gone, and the game would be all about free to play now, and some sort of MOBA.
Oh my god!
So I'm pretty sure every conversation we had with any publisher, we were just super tensed up while we're huddled around the microphone.
They've been really good. I've not had any complaints with Team 17.
All my organs are intact. I mean, you lost an appendix. I don't know.
Yeah, I did lose an appendix, but I don't think they have it.
Back of the sofa. Yeah, check it out. Back of the sofa. But and then and fingers crossed. Obviously, as time goes by, and if the relationship just keeps blossoming with Team 17. Hopefully you can get to a point where they send over all of their interns, which now form the carpet in the office, and you can just clap your hands and issue a command, and they'll jostle you over to the other side of the office without wasting a calorie of effort.
Is that how it works?
I didn't know that was a thing.
And golden milkshakes. Cool. No, is this not how it...
That's what Notch gets, I think.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. No, there's a chap I'd love to interview. That's someone I'd like to sit down with and have a good interview with. So with Overcooked, are there any ideas, even if it was for Overcooked, that you've had and they were just terrible, and they might not quite ruin you if you tell me, but they're still worth telling me because, or even other game ideas, or have you thought about what you're doing in the future with regards to, you guys could, for want of a better phrase, rinse the hell out of Overcooked, but equally, because you guys are creators, you must be also thinking about other stuff as well for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably future-wise, I think we're now looking at prototyping other things. I mean, there's still Overcooked content that has yet to, is still in the pipeline as such. So Overcooked 2 is still getting updates all the time. But what the game we would be looking at next would be probably a non-Overcooked type thing.
Yeah, it's been really fun actually, just having a little bit of breathing time recently to just get back into prototypes and start building up other ideas. I think we obviously can't talk about much about what we're doing, mainly because we can't describe what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment it's really lacking that elevator pitch of being a clean sentence. As I say, have terrible ideas for Overcooked. I'm trying to think now whether there's anything racking my brains.
What that we actually nearly put in.
Well, I was just wondering, you see, because I was just thinking that instead of, because the bad guy in Overcooked 2 that's the unbred, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
You see, you could have had it based in either my neck of the woods, which is Wales, or up in the north, and then you just could have called it the inbred.
That would have got a certain amount of trouble.
Extra limbs hanging off people and stuff like that. Although that would have been really harsh, because then you could have put it in all of Team 17's staff, couldn't you? Because they're based in Yorkshire as well, and that would have been deeply offensive as well. So okay, maybe not so good. Or maybe Undercooked, where you're actively trying to poison everybody, and if you cook anything correctly, then that's a disappointment.
I'm trying to figure out how the scoring system works for that, but I guess it's just like you're taking
Death.
Insurance policies out on your customers.
Absolute genocide of your customers, I think, is clearly what
Just
you...
little skulls totting up at the bottom of the dark.
Yeah, and obviously an audio cue, a little scream in the background as they die. So now I know you guys have sort of, Phil's mentioned before in previous interviews about how you obviously want to keep it, as tight as can be with numbers working on a game.
Yeah.
Is that still the case where it's a rigid rule for yourselves, or do you think to yourself, look, if we need to take on one person, then we will take on one person, because of course, you don't want to shoot yourselves in the foot with your own creative vision, or would you rather curtail what you're doing to try and keep it as a group that you're genuinely happy with?
I think we're in an interesting space now with our own prototyping stuff, where we have had a little bit of taking on people, not permanently, but like sort of as a temporary thing. So we had a friend of ours doing some concept for us at one point, and we've had another friend come in and do some sound effects. But we're still trying to stick to that sort of mentality of not like expanding the studio. It's like where there's a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there, we take people on, but we're like trying really hard to not get to the point where we need to like go crazy, because there are these indies out there, and it's a different way of working, but there is indies out there who really want to expand up and become like we're going to be the next rock star,
next
and we're
big
going to
thing.
be hundreds of thousands of people,
and we need those people. That's great. I mean, Team 17 themselves. I mean, I don't know how much history you know about Team 17, but I'm familiar with how Team 17 came about, because they combined with, what was it, a Swedish studio, and then also 17-bit software, which is a name I remember. And that came off the back of not even game development. That came off the public domain world, for people who don't know anything about this, which was what was called the demo scene, which would have the likes of you guys, but in sort of bedroom form, hacking away at lovely little music demos and graphical demos, and you'd put stuff together, or guys like you would put stuff together, and it would just be out there for, I don't know what the wording would be, but just for the satisfaction of doing it yourselves.
I actually, the first person so when I moved to Cambridge, my flatmate, who I didn't know until I moved in, was a demo scene coder, and he was like really into it, and he produced these amazing, like, it was the kind where they were trying to get like the memory down to like a really small amount of like memory you could store on it, and procedure generate all the music and the graphics. It was really impressive. He'd like written his own programming language for it and things.
And it's a time in games development when this was going on in parallel with it, and there's plenty of people that won't understand that these people who were doing these graphic demos and these music demos and any other sort of thing that they were trying to demonstrate ultimately what they could do with the likes of the Commodore Amiga back then, was that they were often making them better than the games developers. They were finding incredible ways to do things that you just couldn't believe that these machines were running. And then they were having get-togethers. We had a very strong scene in the UK, a demo scene in the UK. Germany was a very strong scene as well in Europe, also Scandinavia, especially Sweden, I believe. another incredibly strong scene. And these people were happy to fly over to the UK, fly over to Germany, fly over to Sweden, and go to these massive parties. And then, of course, the likes of myself, who was just, a gamer, but also loved these beautiful demos with incredible things happening on. I mean, of course, you'd get them on a disc, and we'd be happy paying money for them. I remember going up to London to Novotel Hotel in London, and it was all for demos. It wasn't for games at all. So it was quite something.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I've missed out on this. I mean, it still does happen, right? There still is a demo scene because I mean, this was only 2007. I'm going to say maybe 2010. I can't remember when I was. I was in Cambridge living with Wojciech. But there still is, like, I think in Eastern Europe there's a demo scene still going.
Yeah, I think it sort of rumbles on a little bit in the background, which is kind of heartwarming to know. But equally, I love that it happened, and I'm very happy to even be a part of it from the outside looking in as just a consumer. Yeah. But it was a hell of a time. But then nothing changes in respects to you guys are going to. Okay, well, I don't know how much Overcooked tries to push the PS4 hardware, because obviously. The hardware itself is so
not
impressive
intentionally
these days, every generation.
It's not intentionally pushing any hardware.
Ollie's resisted putting in something that just puts the PlayStation 4 on maximum fan speed or whatever.
If it is pushing the hardware, it's because of something bad I've done. And I apologise.
Well, now, just out of interest, I don't want to get bogged down into too much detail.
Sure.
But now, this is on the Switch as well, is that right?
It is.
Obviously, we have. Yeah. Now, you see, last Christmas I bought my girlfriend a Switch, and I can already see the limitations. So she was playing Splatoon with her sister, over in the Netherlands, and of course their phone call or their call was on Skype because Switch doesn't have. That's still the same case now, isn't it?
They have voice chat, I think, but our game doesn't. I think it's only Fortnite that currently supports voice chat. I think
that's the case. I haven't looked recently.
As far as we know.
Right, okay. So is that a native to the platform voice chat, or is that Fortnite managing to just wangle it into the software itself?
I think it's a separate app, actually.
Yeah,
I don't know. Okay. I'm just saying things now. I should Google it.
I think it's in there. I think it runs through the Switch. I don't know quite how it works. But there are limitations to the Switch just to the virtue of it being portable. I think it innately is always going to be a less powerful thing than the sitting TV console. But of course, yeah. Nintendo's never been chasing that. Really, at least not in recent memory, trying to be the most powerful console of all the consoles. Yeah. As far as indies go, most indies anyway, it doesn't really matter to us that much as long as we can get it to run at an acceptable frame rate, and most indie games should be able to run at an acceptable frame rate because we just don't have the massive amounts of tessellation shaders and.
Well, it's the last thing you do, isn't it? When you start as an indie, is decide, okay, we're going to make the most graphically sort of
you'd be great
intensive because it's just so much work. It requires bodies, and that's the one.
And time. You can't make assets like a AAA studio can, so there'd be no reason to try and make something that pushes the hardware in that way. Obviously, there are indies out there who are doing really impressive things with shader. Shaders and or even the No Man's Sky people who are doing it's not the assets as much as it is the procedural generation that generates a lot of the sort of technical impressiveness. Most indies aren't producing really super detailed high poly character assets and things, so we don't have to worry so much about what the Switch limitations are.
I'm hoping that obviously small indie developers are smart enough to not bite off more than they can chew, because otherwise it'll just completely and utterly bite them on the arse when it comes down to it. And we've actually seen that obviously play out in the media, or sadly I think from my perspective in the case of No Man's Sky with Hello Games, where a sort of certain momentum has gathered and you realise that they're no longer in control of that momentum. So by the time the game comes out, they're there going, oh God, the community are not happy, so we need to learn from this.
If Overcooked had that kind of momentum in the media, say, and there was suddenly hundreds of thousands of people
feel about cooking.
I was more thinking that they'd be scrutinising the first trailers we released. The first trailer for our game has lots of just random levels that we were sort of playing around with at the time, some of which we cut. And I hate to think that like if we'd had all the Eye of Sauron on us at that time, whether they'd be like, hold on a minute, you promised us that level in that very first trailer you made 12 months ago.
Absolutely true. Yeah. Not calling attention to our own failures or anything, but the logo for Overcooked has like an egg in a frying pan and like an octopus's tentacle. and like, no, that's not in the game. That's not there.
I just thought, have you had anybody be overly politically correct with your game? Because obviously we see things in the news these days. People are getting so sort of sensitive over certain things. And I was watching Phil in an interview just yesterday on YouTube, and in the background was a poster, and it had the little chefs in the background in the design of the poster you had. And there was the little black character in the poster, and then behind him was the white guy with a knife. And I thought, I half hope that someone's got sensitive about this and sort of kicked up a fuss saying, you don't realise what you've done in your poster. And you're there thinking, guys, it's just a poster of the characters. You've not had anything like that, have you? That's calling out for equality, this and that.
No one's ever going to be as hard on us as we are, probably.
There was one thing, although it wasn't really politically. Well, maybe it is. It was basically the original version of the Overcooked logo had a chef who was hanging from the bottom, and you could just see his little naked bum.
That's true. The naked bum caused a lot of consternation in America. Yeah, that was a real problem.
And that was actually going to raise our certification, our age rating from an E for everyone to what was it then?
14 or
14 in the States.
50, I think 15 in
so
States.
So it would have been E everywhere except for America. So we had to
because it was partial nudity, and they were very strict about it. It was like that logo, and because it was in the logo as well, we had to change the logo internationally.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, because if it had been in the game, we could have shipped to like an American version of the game that doesn't have a chef's bum in it. But because it's in the logo, it had to be like changed absolutely everywhere.
We had to change it for all the trailers and things, and that was a real horrible sort of 24 hours when we realised that was actually going to be an issue.
During my research into you guys, I did not realise I'd be dealing with two heathens that clearly need to just burn in hell for such disgraceful nudity.
I mean, looking back at it, it was very, very gratuitous, wasn't it? What were we thinking?
Well, that gets you into the whole world of, you look at the absolute gore that you see in the TV programs like The Walking Dead over in the US, and the fact that you're thinking, you guys need to look at your profanity, because if that was going down, every other word would be utterly profane of that, just the highest caliber bad language. It's a bit of a strange world over there. So, but I like the fact that you must be able to. You must be able to sort of sneak that in there somewhere. Oh, I have to ask.
Sneaking a chef's bum into the game.
I was just going to say, cheekily, but it's. I used to deal with programmers who would put in a Star Wars scroller in all of their software, and you'd have to click a particular sort of pixel on a letter of the software, and this is business software that would sell for millions,
Amazing.
And have you guys managed to sneak anything into your stuff, or do you just dare not, or do you not have the time to do this?
I think it's one of those things where I always want to sneak loads of Easter eggs into the game, and then it's the thing where you're just like, well, obviously we haven't got any time for this.
Yeah. I kind of want to lie now and say there's lots of Easter eggs that people haven't found, just to get people
get everybody to go back and play.
Yeah, that's good.
There's some golden tickets for the next chocolate factory visit. There's some
The thing I really wanted to do, and I never did, was there was a bug at one point in the city kitchens in Overcooked where because you can get as many onions out of the crate as you like until you literally just make the game slow to a crawl. And we never got rid of that because I just thought it was funny. But so hundreds and hundreds of onions, you can get them out. But there was a point at which you could escape over the walls of the kitchen.
Yeah. The physics, you could actually sort of pop on top of
you could
them,
finally
build a ramp
climb
of onions.
up onions and escape. And then if you were saying single player, the camera would stay with you, and the model for the outside of the city was quite extensive because we'd actually taken like one large model and put kitchens in different places.
Hindsight, mad idea.
It's really bad for optimization, but we'd done that. So you could actually like walk around the Onion Kingdom in sort of like a free open world kind of way.
Yeah, it was really cute. It kind of had this sort of Animal Crossing vibe.
Yeah, it was nice, but it only worked obviously in single player, and it was we could never have released it with like that on the consoles because we never got through cert, and it was just like, oh, it's a shame because I wanted to add like something in that outer world, but we just had to put hard ceilings in all the kitchens and stop you from being able to do it. So sadly, that did not make it into the game.
I've got an idea for you, and it's based completely off Overcooked, but it's the driving part. Do you know what? We were just driving around recently in the game, choosing the levels with the little bus. And I just said out loud, I said, do you know what? I said, if the guys ever do a little, sort of equivalent micro machines, when we were just driving up and down the ramps and around the scenery, I think I'd play that.
The cooperative controls at the same time.
Oh my God. That would be horrendous. Would be like just trying to take the wheel off each other all the time. That would be the arguments. But no, it's and funny enough, you're talking about how your hearts clearly sort of resonate strongly with couch co-op, and relatively recently we had a new Micro Machines come out, and a few friends and I just fancied doing something that, even though we hadn't done it together before, but we'd all done it independently with other friends years ago, which was to play Micro Machines together. And yet they'd left out the ability to play with just your friends online. So that was it. The game was dead to us.
Right.
So you could only play locally together, or you could only play online in a lobby with loads of random people. Well, it's not meant in the most horrible way, but my friends and myself are actually really picky, and we want to play together because our senses of humour, they're not for public consumption.
Well, that's part of the joy of local multiplayer, or just playing, in the same space, is that camaraderie, is the kind of the talk. We often say that a lot of the gameplay from Overcooked actually happens outside of the game. It's what's happening in the kitchen. It's like in the living room. It's the interaction between the people who are playing, the banter and the shouting.
Part of me wanted to stick to our guns and just never make the game online at all. But
and that was really nice to see, though, because obviously you've gone on record and said, we don't want to curtail it and keep it away from other people.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, it's not like you said, well, we're not doing local co-op anymore. We're only doing online. No, you've only added to it.
We would
so
never
you
do that. That would be absolutely against what we would believe. I think that the online stuff is one of those things where, it was something where there were people contacting us and going like, oh, my brother's sent overseas or whatever, and we used to play together, and we'd really like to play together again, and we can't because the game's not online. And it was just like,
and suddenly, when we'd set out to make this local multiplayer, it's like, well, who are we to say that,
Yeah, who do you say you can't play it just because you know your friend's living in a different state or whatever? It was particularly the thing that came up with American players, because obviously they travel around a lot more. I think with the thing with online is just the cost of doing it in terms of like the time is so high that you could never do it with being a studio as small as ours without help.
Yeah, I mean, we always said that, like, if we were to make Overcooked 1, if we were at the time to make Overcooked 1 online, then we would have basically had a half, if not a quarter of the game that would have been online.
Yeah. I think we just wouldn't
have
been able to do it. I mean, the first game, I think if we'd have tried to make it online, we would have needed another 6 months of development, at least.
Yeah, it was just a no-go, really.
Like,
there was never any point where we were just like,
it could be done.
I think we maybe did some prototypes at one point. It was just like, you know what? No, we've worked on online games before. We're aware of how long it's going to take, and it's just not worth it.
It puts a lot of limitations on what you can do. Every mechanic you add suddenly becomes, and then spend a month making this work online, which becomes a real problem. I mean, I wouldn't expect us to necessarily like everything we do to be online now. From this point onwards, I think it's like...
No, you haven't set a precedent. I'm sure it'll change with every game, in whatever you guys do. But it's nice for people to hear about it, because so many people will say naive things. That's not meant in a horrible way. We're all naive in a certain way, and we're all learning. But it's the fact that you'll have people just say, "Oh, but you could have just done online. You've already got it working in local." And it's not that easy. There's a lot of network code, as you've said. You would have just done almost next to nothing with the rest of the game, and how much effort it would have needed. So,
and in fairness to our community, we've had lots of people, email us and say just that, "What, you guys are idiots, why didn't you make it online?" And when we reply to them and say, "Look, we're a studio of 2 people, and this is the work that's required, this is how long it takes," without fail, everyone's turned around and said, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea, so sorry, blah, blah, blah." It's as you say, it's just, it is naivety, it's just ignorance, because you're not aware really of what's involved, and as soon as you hear it...
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just hard getting that information out there, I think.
Yeah, people don't necessarily understand video game development, and that can be an issue sometimes with just going like, but it would take us an extra year, and with a team of 5 people to get this to be a thing that's possible, and it's not always going to be possible at all, even for some things.
But that's what was really nice about Overcooked 2, is we then had that opportunity to actually do the thing that we, said that we couldn't do. Now we could team up with Team 17, and that was like a big part of
and
that.
That's where a publisher can really help, obviously.
That was a big part of why we agreed to Overcooked 2 in the first place, is because they said, okay, well, we've got this team available, would you be interested in doing the online part of it?
Yeah, and I mean, Team 17, obviously the sequel has at least I'm going to say 20 people, 30 people working on it, something like that. It's a lot of people, and that's what you need if you're going to do a game that is online, and also it's just very polished. They've just a bit of graphical upgrade to it and getting it released on all 4 platforms simultaneously as opposed to just the 3 and that kind of thing.
Now, obviously, something in the press we've heard about recently with Rockstar and Red Dead has been this sort of kerfuffle about crunch time and the fact that people are being publicly flogged and so on and so forth. And so it's just that sort of, how bad did you have it in Frontier Developments? Could you feel that stress? Do you know exactly what that's like? And, does everybody know? Because I think the industry pretty much knows. But also, how does it now compare to you guys with just Ghost Town Games?
I mean, I don't want to throw the rest of the industry under the bus for this. I think it's very difficult it's very difficult as an industry to avoid crunch to some extent, but I think we should be trying to avoid it.
It's fair to say that we've worked our fair share of crunch.
Yeah, I think everyone in the industry has done some degree of crunch, some more than others. I think the larger the studio, the worse it gets to some extent, just because the larger the project, the more organisation has to happen to prevent it. So I'm not that surprised that a studio like Rockstar, for example, which is enormous, has goes through some difficult issues with crunch. That doesn't necessarily make crunch an excusable thing. I think that we could be a lot more flexible to just shipping projects later and not killing our workforces. I think that's the thing we could just do. And I think part of what happens with the industry is that you announce a release date sometime in advance, and then you set up all of your sort of PR stuff ready to go, and then you're in this situation where if you don't release at that time, you expect a massive backlash from the audience. And I think maybe we could be a lot more generous with studios when they maybe studios just need to bite the bullet and go, no, you know what, we're going to release our game 3 months later because...
I mean, we're in a very privileged position from the point of view of we don't have, at least currently, we don't have these strong deadlines, we don't have hundreds of people waiting for us to do any work, or we don't have we're not working with a partner who is funding the development of our next project.
That's true.
There's lots of different factors that I think obviously put a lot more pressure on companies to have to crunch in some ways. Which is something we don't really have to deal with.
It's very different being an indie studio like ours, where it's just the 3 of us, because we're working for ourselves to some extent. And if we work long hours, it's sort of we're not exploiting anybody in some ways. But
and of course, you're also intimately aware of what you guys are getting up to, or at least you have an understanding of what Gemma's doing and how busy Gemma might be, because of course the game has a certain size scope. Whereas obviously when you're looking at those AAA games, they have a scope that's so vast and huge. How they're even managed itself is possibly a modern day miracle.
Yeah, and I think there's a problem with the fact that there's this temptation to sort of try and get as many hours out of your staff as possible in a studio like that. But when you're an indie studio, you know that isn't productive, because you're no longer making the decision of I need to get this other person to work. It's I need to get myself to work, and then if you're working 12 hours a day, you realise quite quickly that your quality of work decreases. Whereas in a large studio, it's hard to sort of make that decision. No, we need to force our staff to go home today because we're actually they are actually now not working as productively as they would.
Particularly when you're dealing in man hours and your production teams breaking things down into how long they're going to take, which is something that we generally don't do.
Yeah, but I think as an industry in general, we just need to be sending people home. And that's what needs to happen, because I think crunch is inevitable in an industry that allows as much overtime as you're willing to give. I think, and as an indie, you don't do that to yourself because you are in charge of your own hours.
Yeah, exactly. It shines a light on how impersonal a big organisation can be.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, it'll take the proverbial and not thrash you to within an inch of your life, but it will ultimately try to get as much from you. And even though there isn't a boss staring at you going, you will stay in late, or at least hopefully there isn't, you will feel that at all times. Whereas with you guys and Gemma, then it's, I assume, a lot more sort of gentle, a lot more forgiving, and a lot more flexible, obviously. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's the virtue of being indie. I think the problem, for us is obviously we don't manage anybody really. And as such,
exactly,
the decisions that we have to make are just so much easier than a decision of the size of like a massive AAA studio. So it's hard for me to sort of like pour cold water on them when I'm like, well, we're not hiring anybody specifically because we don't want to have to deal with the problems that they are, having to deal with.
Handily sidestepping those issues.
I mean, putting my political hat on for a very brief moment, I think this is
go for it.
Yeah, this is the virtue of a union movement in the games industry.
I nearly asked whether we go down the union route or even go down a legislative route, which is what Japan has done with their gaming industry, isn't it? Because they've actually brought out laws now to start trying to look after the suicides or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't necessarily... I think it's actually in the games industry's best interests, even for... it may not necessarily be seen as this, but I think for a large studio it probably is in their best interests to have some sort of union system within their organization, just so that they know like what they're asking their staff to do. Because I think sometimes there's this mentality of, we'll just up the man hours and everything will be better, and it's just like, if you had...
It's hard not to see people as numbers in those situations.
When you're dealing with an organization of 1,000 people, then it's... I think the virtue of a union movement is sort of rebalances that, and it can actually be a very positive thing for a communication between a workforce and a director if it's done well. I think that's been seen in other industries, and I think it would be good for the games industry to move in that direction. If it could be done in a way that isn't just immediately grinding everything to a halt.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as we've seen with other industries, you need to not give them too much power, otherwise they'll ruin the industry as well. I mean, so there's as always, there's a balance.
Yeah, everything's always to some extent a balance, but I think the games industry is probably does need to move in that direction.
And let alone that it's still very new and wet behind the ears with certain things. It's easy for us to say, look how big the games industry is, and the fact that I think in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, in the last 6 months, I've read that it's taken more money than the film and the music industry put together, which is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
So,
but
both
of which
so
industries,
young still.
Those other industries are both of which unionised industries. So it's like,
exactly.
And I mean, but then also unions haven't been a panacea that solved all of the films industry's problems. So I don't know whether I don't know what the full answer is.
No, but they're so well established. They've been going for many more decades. So it's we're getting there as such. So it's so listen, guys. With this bit of free time you've had, have you had a chance to sit down and play anything else and relax, or do you take a baseball bat or a cricket bat if you want to go full British to your monitors and smash them out of the windows, or is it straight back to whatever your favourite gaming tipple?
It's been good actually. This is the first stretch for quite a while where I think I've been able to sit and play lots of games. I've caught up on a lot of the sort of bigger release titles, as well as lots of cool little interesting indie things that have taken my fancy.
Yeah, it's really nice being indie as opposed to working in the industry where we were doing indie as a second job, that we can now actually have time outside of games development to play games.
Yeah, of course.
I don't sit down and play Overcooked all that much.
Oh, really? What?
It's
the best game that's ever been made. I'm sure that's true.
I actually probably have played it.
Traitor.
Played it more in the last few weeks there, because my niece is really into it. Since we added the practice mode, she just loves just sitting and spending hours just making smoothies. So I have to sit and play that with her a few times.
Yeah. So what have you been playing, Phil?
I've just started playing Overcooked, which I know you played as well. I've been enjoying that, and I've been playing Into the Breach as well on my Switch, which I've been really enjoying.
Have you found that it's changed what platform you play on? Just out of interest, in the sense that, because obviously we were talking about how, there's limitations, but there's pros and cons with the hardware like Switch. So do you find that you're now playing more on the go? Or do you still catch yourself relaxing and melding and becoming at one with the sofa and then playing on the Xbox or a PlayStation or something?
Because I travel a fair bit and getting on planes and trains and stuff, that's when the Switch really comes into its own, and I'm loving that. I'm loving that now it isn't as big an issue if a plane is delayed by a couple of hours, because I know I can just crack open the Switch.
That is nice.
Play games.
Switch does make flights
nice.
Yeah.
Games.
And it's the fact that obviously you're playing quite a meaty sort of game. This isn't a little sort of 45-minute game. I mean, obviously it could be, but it's not that sort of game that you would find on the likes of an iPhone. And you still get to dive into something like Breath of the Wild, for example, which is just a monumental-sized game, and still scratch that itch as such, I guess.
I definitely play the Switch more in handheld mode, and then if I'm back at home, it'll be PlayStation or Xbox on the TV.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That would be fascinating, wouldn't it? I wonder if Nintendo will have they or will they ever release the metrics on, let alone whether they even have the data available to see how often it's played, not docked and or docked and up into their TV.
I bet it's mostly handheld, and I'd love to know how much it's played outside of the house.
Now, wouldn't that be great? Not just uncoupled, but outdoors, for example, or just on the move. Yeah.
I said this on a panel interview thing, and everyone disagreed with me. Everyone was playing their Switch on TV, which surprised me.
Weird.
It's like
they're all wrong. Did you tell them they were all wrong?
Do you know I didn't?
Okay.
I think you unfriend them.
I should have just left, unplugged the mic, and just walked off stage.
Yep. A little petrol perimeter all around the fire exits. let's see how good this fire exit. I'm just joking. No. Don't kill him this time. Right then. Okay. Well, that was absolutely lovely, guys. If there's anything you want to say, you're more than welcome to. Well, I mean, in the sense that don't get me in trouble, but if there's something coming up soon that you're saying that is there more DLC we need to know about, or is there the fact that this is the bit where you go quiet back into your bunkers and we'll see you in 2 years' time?
No. There's more Overcooked work in the pipeline. As for when you'll hear about any of our new projects, that's sort of a big question mark for us at the moment.
Our own prototyping stuff is probably a way off. We've just had a piece of DLC come out. We've just had our lunar update come out, which was free and everyone can get. Which is
lovely.
5th February, and it's all like Chinese cooking themed. There's a Chinese dragon in there getting in your way, and some various cool little things.
Now, is that on that's on every platform that Overcooked's on? Yes,
every platform. We're still managing to keep that up. There will be further Overcooked things in the pipeline, and people follow us on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. They can find out.
Yeah, as things are related to anything big. Like
there we go.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys, for coming on. That was lovely.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much.
There we go. Yeah, and next time something's out, let's catch you guys again and we'll have a chat about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great talking to you.
Lovely stuff. Phil, Oli, Ghost Town Games. Thank you very much.